I believe that we've got the sound back at least, so that's something. So I will carry on with where I left off as best I can here. Sorry, there's no picture. Maybe we'll get that. Maybe we won't. But it looks like we'll have sound for a while anyway. So we will have a picture later, I guess. So safety drivers. Anyway, my biggest concern, and you guys know that drive for a living, you guys know that crap always runs downhill, and you know that sooner or later, if anything goes wrong, they're always looking at the truck driver. And my fear is, with these autonomous trucks and these safety drivers, the safety driver's job is going to be, when the truck messes up, the safety driver is supposed to jump in there and take over and correct or save the situation. And sometimes that's fine if it's, if it can't get itself backed in or something. But if it finds itself in a situation where it gets into a skid on ice, for instance, and at that point, they expect the safety guy to jump in and save the truck, we all know that in a second, stuff can go wrong that you just cannot drive your way out of. So a guy hopping into the seat after the truck has gone into a skid, for instance, sometimes there's no way to save that. And what I'm concerned with is, at the end of the day, they'll look at a situation like that and hang it on the safety driver because they're going to say, well, that was his job description to help the truck in tough situations. He didn't react fast enough, and the safety driver is in trouble legally. And it's just that's what I worry about with this type of thing. Now, we in the trucking industry know that professional drivers avoid getting into those scenarios in the first place. And we can see them coming. We can forecast. We can predict. Autonomous trucks will not have that ability. They'll just get into the situation, they'll hit the ice, and then they won't know what to do rather than see the ice coming. So my concern is, well, if you're the safety driver in a situation like that, like, where does your liability end? Because truly, it's not your fault at all, because you weren't driving the truck when the thing went into a skid in the first place. And I don't think it's very fair to expect a safety driver to be able to pull the truck out of a situation like that, to be able to save a bad situation, because that's just not always possible. So number one, I'm worried about the liability of these guys. And I don't know if any of you guys would ever even opt for that kind of a job. I don't think I'd be interested, because there'd be so many issues. Now, and the big CEOs of the carriers have said, well, safety drivers are all right, but it's not really cost effective for us to still have to pay a driver in the truck when we're paying for this autonomous technology. If there is going to be a safety driver in the truck, a lot of these carriers are going to want to pay as little as they possibly can, just because they're already not cost effective with the technology plus a driver on board. They've admitted this. They say there's no bones about this. They're in this for fully autonomous vehicles, not vehicles that are autonomous some of the time, and a lot of the time they're not. So, the wages are going to be an issue. So my next thing is going to be, well, if this safety driver transition happens to professional truck drivers, I'd want to say that I'd want to be waving the flag at the Teamsters saying, hey, you better come and get involved in this, because these carriers half the time will not protect our rights. We need a body to protect our rights. whether it's the Teamsters or another union, but I think these safety drivers are going to need protection from a powerful body, because you know as well as I do, some of these huge trucking companies will just throw these poor guys to the wind. They'll sign up for a job like this having no idea the kind of trouble they can get into. They'll get into a situation not knowing any better, and all of a sudden they'll be the guy that's hung out to dry. And so I'm afraid of that. I don't know. I'd be interested if you guys let me know, would you even think of applying for one of these safety driver jobs? Like, initially it looks great. You just sit back in the passenger seat and get paid to look around. Well, I can't imagine that would be a very exciting day. It'd be a long day, but I can't imagine that'd be a very exciting day unless something goes completely off the rails, and then you're in trouble. So I don't understand the insurance companies that are going to want to jump in initially on these types of ventures with autonomous trucks and safety drivers. I sure wouldn't want to be the first insurance company in. But it now becomes obvious, and even the officials are admitting it here, like this co-founder, Sean. It's going to be years and years and years and years, if ever, before these trucks can completely drive themselves. And yes, point A to point B on a clear, dry day. But we all know that even in Arizona, the weather isn't always perfect, and there's going to be stuff that happens. So if this is truly the next stage for professional drivers, if these self-driving trucks or semi-self-driving trucks are going to become a viable part of the trucking industry in the future, I think truck drivers better start thinking about the pros and cons of what may be entailed in this job. And if it's going to be, riding for 12 hours and then fighting through a traffic jam at the end of your shift, I'm not sure that that's a particularly desirable job. I got into trucking because I wanted to see the country and I love to drive, but here are going to be autonomous safety drivers that don't even get to drive the truck. They just kind of get to watch it. You're supposed to, right now, they're supposed to have both hands on the wheel, but how long is that going to be entertaining? 15 or 20 minutes. Some guys are going to transition to the bunk, and then something's going to go wrong. It's going to be a situation that needs a whole lot of guidelines and a whole lot of controls. And right now there are none. There are absolutely none. So I'm worried for the future of truck drivers as we know them, should this ever come into being. And I don't think, fully autonomous trucks will ever happen in our lifetime. But I do see this business with the safety drivers starting in different stages and phases, and especially in the Southwest U.S., where the conditions are really good all the time for driving. I can see that becoming a thing within our lifetime. And I'm thinking, we got to think this through, and we got to decide what we're willing to put up with and what we want and what we need to make this a viable job for a professional truck driver. Because you can't just sit in the back and get paid minimum wage. That's not going to cut it. We're all here to make a future for ourselves and a better living. So there are all sorts of things that need to be considered. And I think it's, if this is going to happen, and it may happen, it's time to start thinking about it now rather than just, getting some guy out of CDL school, popping him in the truck because he's got a brand new license, kicking him down the highway, and then 3 months later he has a crash, and there he is just shrugging his shoulders, and they're hanging him out to dry. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. Now, the big carriers are saying, well, professional drivers will always have a job in this industry because there are just some things that these trucks are just not going to be able to do. So what they're saying is the professional drivers that stick with it will get the most tricky routes, the most unviable roads, the worst weather. Those are the kind of drives they're going to get. And what they're saying is, well, the autonomous trucks, will help take over the slack that's created by this driver turnover. That the toughs still make a good living, but they'll get the worst runs, and the autonomous trucks with the safety drivers will get the easiest runs and help them eliminate this driver shortage problem. But it's going to be interesting to see too, because the next argument is going to be, well, the safety drivers aren't really driving, so we really shouldn't have to pay them like a real truck driver. And then there's going to be the argument about the hours of service. Well, the safety driver was in the bunk, so really he should be able to continue another 5 hours down the road to help the truck meet its schedule. And there are going to be all sorts of things that come from this. Carriers looking, different ways, again, to save and save and save more money, to cut more costs. And particularly if they're publicly traded like some of the huge carriers are, because their concerns are costs and paying their dividends to their shareholders. So they'll try to squeak the money right out of trucking with these trucks, and they'll be as expensive as hell. Now, something else to consider, the trucking industry right now is in a huge legal push to allow these lease operators. You've heard this AB5 argument coming in California, but that's starting to spread to other states. But basically, what the trucking industry wants right now is for the truck drivers to buy the trucks and maintain the trucks, because the great big carriers don't want that expense. So when these semi-autonomous trucks start to be, are they going to expect new truck drivers now to buy these semi-autonomous experimental trucks just so they can be the ones to sit and ride in them? Because, there's no point in trying to beat this AB5 if they're just going to wash out owner-operators when these autonomous trucks come in anyway. So they're going to want these truck drivers to buy these semi-autonomous and autonomous trucks and maintain them just to be able to sit in the passenger seat. And that's what they're going to try next after this. They wouldn't be fighting so hard for this AB5 just to give it all up in a few years when the semi-autonomous trucks come in. They want this. They need this. They've got their profit margins so thin that they need the drivers to buy the trucks. And the trucks are going to get more expensive, more autonomous. And they're still going to want drivers to buy these trucks. Fred's right. And Fred says there's a driver shortage. It's a pay shortage. And that's been the case for years now. And it's suffered among the great big carriers. The little carriers don't have that problem because they pay their drivers well. So, I see the big carriers is getting into worse and worse trouble with this AB5, and then expecting new guys to buy semi-autonomous trucks just to keep going. But it's a messed up industry. It's a messed up industry right now, and you can't even imagine the future of it. Yeah, Rastemeyer says, what's going to happen when the fuel gauge quits working and needs fuel, but the fuel gauge says otherwise? And stuff like that's going to go on all the time. The first autonomous truck to deliver into a grocery warehouse where they expect the driver to break the skids down, that truck will sit there for months. The lumpers won't approach the truck. There'll be no driver in the truck to approach the lumpers, and the grocery chain will just leave that truck sit for a month before somebody figures out the problem's wrong, because you know how ignorant some of those grocery warehouses can be. But so it'll be interesting to see. But I certainly do hope are protected by legislation. I guess that's part of what worries me, because I can just see this whole group being taken advantage of and making it worse for new drivers than it already is, and I don't want that. Trucker Hershey, fuel will be scheduled stops no matter what the gauge says. Yeah, I imagine that's right. And there's part of what they're going to expect the safety driver to do is fuel the truck and open the doors when it's time to deliver and stuff like that. And initially they're saying that the safety drivers will have to stick with the hours of service that are in position now. But you just know the way the trucking industry is, that they're going to want to change that. The ATA is going to start lobbying for longer available hours and all sorts of stuff just to squeeze more money and more advantage out of it. Joe Cummings says, we used to have a good system of owner-operators who were responsible for their own trucks and also had the title for their trucks. Yes, and the system has changed, and owner-operators were a viable part of this industry. And it seems now like those true owner-operators are disappearing more and more and being replaced by these lease operators. And, when these safety drivers then come in, where is that going to leave everybody? That'll be the big question. Can a safety driver be an owner-operator and be a lease operator at the same time? And are you going to find somebody that's going to want to invest in a new technology, self-driving or semi-autonomous truck, and I can't imagine what the cost will be, and hope it all works out? Hope the truck doesn't break down, because God knows who will be able to fix it if it does, and it will. Trucker Harold says, who's going to communicate with the shipper and receivers? Well, probably, the dispatch will take over that task. They can satellite the location of the truck and probably should do all of that stuff. But there are going to be a myriad of issues. So it'll be interesting to see. But when the guys building these trucks are admitting now that true autonomous self-driving trucks are decades and decades away, when those guys are admitting it, that they've started to recognize some of the issues, and they realize now that they're going to need these come. And they just can't program into a computer a truck may encounter in the course of a few million miles. So the truck will know how to deal with that scenario and have it work out correctly. Josh Bullock says he doesn't trust automated trucks, and I don't trust him either. Neither does Benjamin. That would be perfect for the CR England 3-bunk trucks. 3 drivers doing 8 hours each. Truck can move 24 hours a day. Trucker Hershey, and that was the whole idea behind this 3-bunk system now. And they like to call 2 or 3 unskilled guys behind the wheel, just keeping the thing going all the time. And that's what CR England was after. Marcus Wilson says it's not a matter of if the tech fails, it's a matter of when. Everything breaks down. Everything sooner or later will have issues. So these autonomous and self-driving trucks and semi-self-driving trucks will, just like any other piece of equipment. It's just how are they going to manage the breakdowns? So, Josh says, I would never want a computer controlling my truck. No, Josh, I wouldn't either. I trust myself and my skills more than the engineering they could develop. I just rather be in charge of the whole scenario myself. And I don't really want to sit there and go along for the ride and hope it all works out. Yeah, Fred Besmer says, I can't imagine what trucking is going to be like in another 20 years. It'll be interesting. That is one thing for sure, Fred. But, in a lot of ways, we that are still in the trucking industry now may have well seen the best days of trucking, because I can't imagine it's going to be much fun 20 years from now. Just sitting there staring out the windshield, hoping the truck makes the turn or the corner, wondering if the truck can back itself in, and that type of thing. So, but that sounds like a boring job to me too. But we'll see how it all pans out. The safety driver suddenly has to use the restroom. That's another problem, because you to maximize the efficiency of the truck. But the safety driver is going to need to get out to stretch his legs. He's going to need to stop and get food. How much of that are they going to allow before they say, well, you're interfering with the efficiency of the move? Right? So you really can't stop for a coffee or to go 10-100. You're just going to have to cross your legs and keep riding, driver. And you just know that's going to happen too. And then it becomes a human rights problem. Peterbilt make a self-driving Peterbilt. Josh, to my knowledge, they don't have anything in the works right now, but Kenworth does. Kenworth is working with, I think it's Aurora autonomous trucks, and they're experimenting in the ports with them to see how those are going to work out. And you can't ignore the technology because it may come along. It may well come along. So the manufacturers have to be prepared to handle it and deal with it and offer trucks equipped like that. But whether they'll, I think they'll become viable to a certain extent. I can't ever see fully autonomous trucks with absolutely no safety driver in them at all, in our generation at all, ever. Because when you think of some of the places, look at the Northwest in the winter, for instance, or British Columbia.